You're listening to Neurodivergent Mates.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent Mates. I'm your host, Will Wheeler, and today we're going to go over Sparkling Minds, Parenting the Neurodivergent Way with Chloé Hayden. Sarah, how's it going, my friend?
Hello, Will. It is lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So for the audience, we had a fair few technical difficulties getting on here. We were sort of like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know what's going to happen here. Well, I don't know about you, but I was freaking out for a little bit there, but we got there in the end, yeah?
Saved by a child, we might add. One of my children came in and saved it. So
yes.
If you're having IT problems, ask a child.
Yeah, did you want to give him a shout out so all of our audience can
shout out to Hunter, the IT guru in my house.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely not me.
It's not you, but all good. We got here in the end, and I think that's the main thing, yeah. But look, what we might do just before we get started, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping, just so the any new listeners who might be coming on, all of that. So, look, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media pages. You can check us out on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And please subscribe. Do whatever you need to do on anywhere where you listen to podcasts. I would, the love or the support would be greatly appreciated. Now, if you haven't already done so, please, check out all the work we're doing at neurodiversityacademy.com. We've got some great things coming up, and 2026 is going to look like a pretty awesome year for us. So please check out that, and please subscribe to our email as well. Now, look, just a heads up for anyone who is listening today, maybe some of the discussion might be triggering. Now, if you need help, please reach out to a loved one or call emergency services. We're not doctors. This is a space for sharing experiences and strategies as well. Now, if you've got a question while we're going through the live cast here, please feel free to just put it into the comments on whatever social media platform you're checking us out on, and hopefully it will come up, and if it's a good question, we'll put it up on the screen there. So I think we're all ready to rock and roll. So Sarah, to start off with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and I suppose what Sparkling Minds mean to you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Will. So my name is Sarah. I am a social worker and equine-assisted psychotherapist. I am also the mum to 5 incredible kids, including my eldest, who is Chloé Hayden, well-known autism advocate, actor and author. And I'm also late diagnosed neurodivergent myself, having been diagnosed at the age of 48 3 years ago. I'm now 51. So neurosparkly is a term that I commonly use as opposed to neurospicy. And to me, Sparkling Minds is the beautiful, messy, chaotic, glitter-filled brains that I imagine when I think about our neurodivergent brains. It's a little bit like glitter. It's messy, it gets everywhere, but you certainly wouldn't want to live without it because it brightens up the life.
Yeah, totally. I've seen some pretty interesting pictures of you. It looks like you're doused in sparkles or something like that.
Love dipping myself in glitter. Absolutely.
Glitter.
I work with a lot of kids and a lot of kids. Glitter. Yeah. Love a bit of glitter.
Nice.
Who doesn't love a bit of glitter? It brightens up everything. So I just love, when I'm working, especially with neurodivergent kids, especially newly diagnosed, that have often been through a pretty rough time to get there. And, I've often had a lot of bullying and teasing, and I love to sort of explain to the kids that their brain is different. And, I explain to them that while neurotypical brains are pretty bland and boring, that their brains are sort of full of rainbows and sparkles and glitter, and that's what makes them unique and amazing. And, I just love sort of seeing their faces when they think about the fact that their brains are different and special. And I really do think that neurodivergent people have often got those super creative, brains that think outside of the box. And so, what better way to think about them than sparkly balls of glitter?
You know what's really interesting, right? Like when I was like, say, young, well, I'd say a young kid when I'm thinking about my teenage life and even in school and that, and I often speak about this to people is that like neurodivergent wasn't a term used back in say the 90s or that type of thing, right? But like I honestly I used to think that I was like, I didn't realize I was ADHD until I was like, I think maybe early 40s or late 30s. And I thought I was the only dyslexic kid in my class there. So I think that when these young kids are learning, hey, look, I am this, there are other people like that out there. It does play a huge role in the character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I just think that like
Yeah, agreed totally.
yeah. And I think that like, I often think back to my time like when was it? Uh People I used to hang out with and like I like you were saying that you were diagnosed quite late. All of that. Do you ever like look back to like when you were like a real like, like the kids that you're dealing with now and sort of think about and go, oh my God, that reminds me so much of me, or oh my God, I wish I had known this, or oh my God, why didn't I do these types of things instead?
Totally, absolutely. And I think you're right. There's so much like we just see it through such a different lens now, particularly for women. And, I think particularly for ADHD, well, we have that kind of perception that when you think about ADHD, you think about those naughty little boys in class who are, spinning on their head in quiet time or being really disruptive or loud and chaotic and getting into trouble and the teacher getting angry at them. And, that's sort of that typical ADHD presentation that we think of when we think about ADHD, or we used to. And so, particularly for women and late diagnosed women, it's so vastly different. And, we sort of look back and now that we know what those kind of early presentation, looks like, then we can identify and know that. And you sort of look back and you go, wow, I wish that somebody had have realized and that you could have got the support and understanding that you need. And, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to, there's a lot of grief, but there's also that sort of realization that like, oh, there was nothing wrong with me. I just, I was misunderstood. People didn't realize how my brain worked and what I actually needed.
What was like being a teenager like for you out of curiosity? Because I found, especially being undiagnosed, all of that, I think for myself, like being a teenager was a very confusing time for me. And like, I just think I look back at it now and I'm like, oh my God, like that makes sense. And that makes sense. But some of the decisions I'm like, and I speak about this quite oftenly. I did go down a very dark path for a long time with drug and alcohol abuse, all of that. And I look at it now and I'm like, oh my God, I was just trying to, I suppose, cope with certain situations I was being put into.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, being a teenager is so difficult for the best of us, but I think particularly for neurodivergent teens that are undiagnosed as well, especially, there's a lot of challenges that go with it. And I think there's always that inner feeling of never being enough and not fitting in and struggling with friends and teachers and, conforming and, being enough or being too much. And so I think for me, I look back and I go, I was always trying to fit in. And so, I was like a chameleon where whoever the cool kids were and whatever they were into, I was suddenly into that. I talk about in my book that, we had this girl turn up to school and she was like a goth, into the Cure and, had all the black hair and makeup, and I'd never even heard of them, but all of a sudden I was like a Cure fan and a goth fan and covering my books in whatever she was in. And then when that friendship sort of fizzled out or she left school, then there was an American girl who was into everything American and horses and riding and like so polar opposite. And suddenly it was like, yeah, that's me. And there's just this desperate need to fit in. And so I think part of that is that you actually end up doing whatever it takes to fit in. And certainly for me, it was, if any boys showed me attention when I was young, I was, absolutely there because I didn't have friends that were girls. I really struggled to maintain friendships. And so there's that real, need for acceptance and fitting in, no matter what that is, whether that's drugs and alcohol, or being promiscuous, or just doing whatever it takes to kind of fit in. Because I think, especially for those of us who are late diagnosed, we know, like, we just knew from a very young age that we didn't quite fit in. We didn't quite get the handbook that all these other people got. We don't really know what's going on, how to know how to have friends and do the right schoolwork and do all this stuff. And so, we're masking so highly, but also trying to just do whatever it takes to fit in, and observing other people and just jumping on board with what they're doing.
Yeah, totally. And you know what, right? Well, everything that you've just explained there, that sounds like me, but the opposite, right? Like as a man version type of thing, right? Because like, I remember when I was at school, and it's so strange. Like I speak to a lot of people who, and not heaps, but some people from school, and I'm like, man, I really struggled in school. I felt like I didn't fit in and all of this. And people are like, oh my God, really? I thought you were the cool popular kid. And I'm like, the cool popular kid? Like I did not think that. I honestly did not think I was the cool popular kid. I was thinking
pretty good at acting. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I must have been pretty good at acting, because like I honestly didn't think that. And then like for me, I remember like one, like you were saying, trying to fit in with the cool kids type of thing. And then I look at it now and I'm like, gee, why didn't I go hang with those people there? Because I would speak to them. I was like you said, a chameleon, but I would be going to lots of different groups within the school and hanging with this one for a while, getting to know these people. And then I think trying to fit in and be someone I wasn't for a while there. And I think that took a really big toll on myself. But it's funny that you said, so did you have a lot of guy friends? Is that what you were saying before? Like really good guy friends and that? Because I had a lot of really good.
I was an old girl. I was at an... Yeah, I probably got along better. I was at an all-girls school, which was probably really difficult, but we had a brother school that was an all-boys school, and I think, I sort of learned what it took to get the boys' attention from a young age to sort of be, to be able to be cool with them. And boys were also easier because I think boys are a lot more direct in what they, mean or say, or, so they can be easier to hang out with. But being at an all-girls school, it was really difficult. But certainly sort of outside of school hours or any activities that I could do that meant hanging out with the boys, I would be more likely to do that. I did really struggle with, with the girls and the, the bitchiness and the changing of friendship groups and those kind of unwritten rules that come with the cool girls about, what's in and what's not and how you're meant to act. And I think I'd be the same, Will. I think people would probably go, oh, like you were fine, you didn't struggle at school. But I always say it's like that analogy of the duck on the water, where above the water the duck looks really calm and everything's fine, and beneath the water you've got these little legs that are just going like mad, trying to keep up, and no one sees that, that constant need to be trying and keeping on top of things. Everyone just sees the kind of calm, and that's exhausting after a while, really exhausting.
Yeah, totally. See, like I said, I was the opposite. A lot of my friends were actually female, right? And they're just my mates, right? And like, we had great time. And I think it was maybe and don't get me wrong, I had a lot of guy friends and that as well, but I would connect really well. And even now I have a lot of female friends and all of that. But I don't know. I just got along with a lot of but you know what I found this, and my mum told me this as well. When I was in like preschool, I had like a lot of like female friends as well, but it was because sometimes I'd like to go outside and kick the soccer ball and that, but I'd be like, oh man, I want to be creative and I want to dress up and pretend I'm this and be like the man doing the whatever in the dress up thing and things like that. I don't know. That was me.
But I think you're right. Well, I think so many neurodivergent men and boys, going back to that neurosparkly kind of brain, in my experience, so many like neurodivergent males tend to be a lot more attracted to that creativity, or there's a softness to them that they're not necessarily wanting to go out and get muddy and kick the football, or they're more intelligent and wanting to sort of sit there and do those kind of more mindful things rather than just your typical boys going out and kicking the ball or mucking around. They're like, I always say that I think the people at the top of any field are neurodivergent. Like, you look at any of the top scientists in the world, the top doctors, the top creative geniuses, even like your Elon Musk type of people, like those people sort of at the top of their field, they're neurodivergent. And so, they're like, their brains from such a young age are so creative and so needing to find out more information. And so I don't think it's surprising that young neurodivergent boys in particular are probably more drawn to, the level of maturity and creativity of the girls who are doing much more fun and creative stuff probably at that age than the boys out, playing with their trucks in the sandpit kind of thing, Yeah,
totally. And I think as well that it was that. And then I think when I grew up, I was sort of like society sort of, I sometimes think it sort of paints it in a certain way where and I'd sometimes go to like friends' parties and all like the females are sitting over here and the males are sitting over here. But when I go to like a more of a neurodivergent type of, community party, it's like we're all together. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, what's going on? Hey, let me tell you this. What's going on? I don't know. That's just what I've experienced, going forward.
More over your interests. Yeah, you're connecting more over your interests and stuff than being male or female or
exactly. It's not about like, hey, I'm interested in this person because I'm attracted to them. I'm interested in this person because I love maybe the music that they listen to or whatever that might be. Hey, sorry, I just wanted to share, we do have a few people, it's coming up LinkedIn user, I'm not quite sure why, but I've had someone here that says, I heard Sarah at the Strong Together conference. I'm Joe's partner, by the way. I'm not sure who Joe's
Hello,
partner
Joe's partner. Yes, I know Joe's partner. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. There's one. And then I had another one come up on the screen. I'm the same, but the caveat, I think I pronounced that, being nearly all of them are neurodivergent. I think we find our tribe. And I think that's true. I think
absolutely we find our tribe.
And I think that a big thing that I found, especially for a long time, was that I didn't fit in with certain things. So I would turn to, say, drugs and alcohol. And then, you attract a certain type of demographic in that, which sometimes doesn't work well with you. But, I think for myself now, I am around people who really, it just works. I'm sure you would know exactly what I'm talking about there. But wow, that was a good one for the first question there. You know what I mean? Yeah, but it's always good when you've got ADHDers like speaking about things that they're passionate about and all of that. Now, moving on from that, what do you think are some of the biggest strengths that neurodivergent parents bring to their families?
I think I love to focus on the magic that we bring and the strengths that we bring instead of the challenges. I think, like we were just saying, we have that understanding and empathy and compassion of the lived experience, for our kids, particularly who, will commonly be neurodivergent if we are. But even if they're not, all kids go through challenges and there's always sort of something going on. Teenage years are hard for everyone. And I think, being able to look back and be creative with our problem solving and our parenting and having enormous levels of empathy, which we now know is true. There used to be the perception that people have a lot of empathy. We now know it's actually the opposite, where we have, probably enormous amounts of empathy. But I think just that compassion and understanding and lived experience of what we've been through and being able to identify and support that in our kids. I like to think that we kind of parent our kids in a way that we wished that we would have been parented if people had have known that we were, dyslexic or autistic or ADHD. And so, I think we have a great sense of humor. I think we have a great sense of fun. I think that we know what matters and we we love to build on those, those skills and focus on the positives, just as we've learned to do with ourselves in our own life. And so I think we're much more likely to do that with our kids and with our parenting. One of the biggest things I say to people that, so commonly parents are told that, if your kid is not good at maths, go and get a maths tutor and focus on maths. Whereas I like to flip that on the head and go, if your kid's bad at maths, but they're great at violin, get a violin tutor instead of a maths tutor, focus on and build on their strengths. Don't worry about the things on maths tutoring, and so by focusing as parents on what our kids' strengths and talents and gifts and just their love, like not even what they're good at, but just what they love doing. And, knowing that that's what we're going to put our focus and energy on, rather than trying to make them great at maths or great at things that society or school or NAPLAN tests might tell us that what our kids need to be good at. We know to focus on what they love.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I think, I failed school. I got the lowest grade you could possibly get. And, I remember like my parents getting like maths tutors, English tutors. And like, it was all, I remember sitting there after school, sitting down for an hour and a half or whatever, trying to like learn these things, which I hated. And it was almost like, felt like burning. I'm sure you would know, if you've ever had to sit through something totally. That you just hated, right? It would just be burning, and it did nothing for me type of thing. But
no, it just makes you hate it. It makes you hate it even more and makes it worse because you just turn your brain off and you're like, I can't, I'm not going to. And yet, parents waste all this time and energy and money, and it just makes everyone sad. Why do it? Yeah. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think, and I was speaking to someone not long ago about this, right? That like, some parents are spending, they've got like 5 different tutors for different things and all of that. And someone said, why do they do that? And I said, for one,
totally.
It's like big business. So people are trying to sell you everything. And I remember my parents, when like we were growing up, they would spend thousands of dollars on, I don't know, these math things where you'd press. Back in those days, you'd have like a tape deck or CD where you'd press the thing and listen back to stuff. But it was just a complete waste of money, But with that being said, I would get E's for things like English and math. But then I would get A's and B's for things like sport and art and things like that, and that's where it should be like really focused on, if that makes sense there. And sorry, can I just say as well, and especially with Chloe, you pulled her out of school, is that correct?
Certainly did, yeah. So we pulled her out not long after she got her official diagnosis of autism. She had struggled through school her whole life, and by the stage she was sort of year 7, year 8, just starting high school. And to be honest, I'd never even sort of considered like homeschooling or pulling my child out. It was never on my radar. It was never something I thought I would do or wanted to do. And it still wasn't. It came not because I thought it would be wonderful to homeschool my child. It came because, we tried her in 4 different high schools and every single one of them just failed her enormously. And, she was bullied relentlessly. She was, left out. It was such a miserable existence for her that her mental health was impacted so badly that her diagnosing psychologist actually said to me, I think you're at the stage of, you got 2 choices. You either pull her out of school or you're going to lose her. And, Chloe confirms now at the age of 28 that what that psychologist said was right. That's where she was at. She had spent so many years so miserable and so devastatingly affected by how horrible school was for her, that she just couldn't be there anymore. So we pulled her out, and I schooled her through Virtual School Victoria, distance education, all the way through high school to the end of year 12.
Yeah. And, I suppose, and just for our listeners, because we do have a lot of listeners from, say, the United States and all of that who might not be aware of who Chloé is, but, Chloé's done some really amazing stuff with a YouTube channel, and she was on a TV show here, what we have in Australia, called Heartbreak High, and she was the one of the main characters there.
It was huge in America as well. So.
It was huge, was it? Oh, I didn't know. So does she go to America and get recognized?
Yeah, massive in America.
Yeah. Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
absolutely. Top 10 in just about every country in the world on Netflix. Yeah.
Wow, crazy.
So
that
they
is
would
pretty
definitely
awesome.
be familiar with it.
That's pretty awesome. But it was actually interesting to hear her speak about her experience on the show was completely different to what hers was in real life there. And it almost brought her a lot of anxiety and that type of stuff. Is that correct?
It did at the start. It's interesting. She had such significant PTSD from her years at school that when she landed, one of the lead roles on Heartbreak High, obviously it was filmed at a school while school was actually still on. And so, it was an active working school with students and teachers and bells and all of the normal school stuff. And, she reflects that the first few weeks of turning up on set, she said she was crippled with anxiety and, all those negative memories of school came flooding back. But what's actually beautiful is that slowly the opposite start to happen, where she actually said it was quite cathartic and healing for her because she was able to experience what she imagined and hoped school would be like and what is probably like for some people, where, she had some wonderful teachers and she had this close-knit group of friends who got her and loved her and, that were loyal to her. And so she says that, in her 20s, she almost got to relive what the high school experience would have been in her, fantasy mind of being a wonderful experience with this crew from Heartbreak High, who still to this day are some of her best friends. And, they all stay in contact and have such a beautiful relationship, kind of like a lot of kids do when they go through high school, because they've been now filming together for several years and, season 3 is coming out in a few months' time. And so, it's been a long-standing relationship from when they first got cast. And so it's almost been like going through high school again. And she's now got this beautiful group of young adults who she hangs out with quite regularly, and they all support each other and love each other. And, so it's turned from it's kind of turned her experience of school into now something that she reflects on as being nice, because she almost looks at Heartbreak High as being her high school experience, because she didn't really have a high school experience. I was her, her teacher and her friend and everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's all. And can I ask, say with her character on Heartbreak High, and this is, I might be completely wrong here, but is that really like what her personality is this where she's really been able to, maybe as a character on Heartbreak High, really bring out who she really is, because it seems like that's her personality in real life type of thing.
100%. It is. Yep, you're spot on. So the team at Heartbreak High were amazing. They actually got her to be part of the, the writing of the character of Quinny and writing the episodes and checking over kind of her responses to things and how she would say things and, even what she was wearing and her friendships and relationships. And, they were so wanting it to be an authentic, genuine, not just a coded neurodivergent character, but a genuine, autistic character, and based on Chloé. And absolutely there's so many similarities in there with Quinny, and they were so fantastic with, if she had feedback or said, oh no, I wouldn't do this, or Quinny wouldn't do that, they would change it and kind of get her opinion on what what it would be. And of course, during the filming there was plenty of episodes where she did have real life meltdowns or shutdowns or overwhelm or anxiety or sensory issues with the the hair and the makeup and the clothes. And so they were sort of able to also witness that in real life, in real time, with with Chloé as a person playing the character of Quinny. And then sometimes it was like, great, let's run with that and actually build this into what we're doing. But it also just gave them a really good understanding of the genuine struggles that she lives with, day to day, because so many people look at her and go, like I was saying before, they don't see the struggles. They just see this, highly articulate and intelligent young woman who's doing TED Talks and, winning actor awards and doing all this amazing stuff, but they don't see that, that she still has a lot of big real life struggles. And so, the cast and crew over the period of filming was sort of able to get a snapshot of what that is actually like and kind of go, right, now we understand when she says, that Quinny is going to be reacting like this. It's like, we've seen that, we understand, because we've seen her doing, the same thing. So, I think in a lot of ways it was a really great experience for all of them, and they were incredibly supportive of her with, turning her trailer into a big sensory space and giving her, extra time out when needing it, and changing a lot of stuff on set to be very sensory friendly and neuroaffirming where they could, which is just awesome. And that came from her lead.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. How does she find, like, she's pretty, I would say, pretty famous now, how does she struggle does she struggle with that at all? Or is it like she embraces it? Because like there would be times, I'm assuming, where you could be like in certain situations. So say did you ever listen to a band called The Vines back in the day?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that the lead singer from The Vines, he's autistic, right? And like he he had big drug problems and all of this, and then like they couldn't figure out why I was having all these problems, and then they identified that he was autistic, and I'm like, wow, that would be such a intense environment to be a rock star and like being thrown into the opposite of what you need. Is that ever like how does she handle it? And probably yourself, how do you handle that as well, being a mother?
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult. And I think, there's this kind of constant battle of, she's so grateful to be living her dream life, which is, acting and advocating and, writing and doing all these incredible things that she's doing. But, with that comes a lot of struggles. Like when I say she can't walk into a shopping centre without being mobbed, I mean, she cannot walk into a shopping centre without being mobbed. She has hordes of people, surrounding her, following her, wanting photos with her, wanting, autographs. And, she understands that because, that's normal with what somebody in her position. And she's so thankful for her fans and all of the people that have helped to get her where she is. But, for somebody who is actually quite introverted and shy in a lot of ways at heart and, and struggles with that, it can be really difficult. And, even just filming for months and months at a time where they're living in a high-rise, hotel or apartment in the middle of Sydney, where she's a country girl at heart, used to living on land and having all of her animals and horses and, trees and space, and all of that is so important for her and for her mental health. And so, there was sort of a lot of having to work in, okay, right, well, in amongst filming, you're going to have to get out of Sydney and go and spend some riding horses in the hills of Sydney and, like out of the kind of city. And, she even snacked her real life bunny rabbit living in one of the hotels there for a few months so that she had an animal living in the hotel.
Wow,
when the hotel cleaners would just come in and clean up every day. And so, there's a lot of, she's thankful and so grateful every day. But yes, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, that's crazy. Because like I have seen like posts on her like Facebook from yourself before asking people, hey, can you please just say, because like I think like there are a lot of like keyboard warriors out there who probably say some very nasty things. And this person, Chloe's just being herself in that. And I think that's where sometimes it like can be like, I don't know, sometimes some neurodivergent people can be quite harsh.
That's the definitely the worst bit of where she is not the fans who come and ask her for a photo, and she's always happy to oblige with that. Without a doubt, the worst bit is the people who get on. There's not a single day that she doesn't post a TikTok or a YouTube or a post on Instagram where she is not absolutely annihilated, and she gets inboxes of, people, death threats and
Death
people
threats.
telling her to do stuff to herself. Yeah, like honestly, to the point where she actually has had to go to the police. She's had to have people monitor her social media, which she still does. And you're right, sadly, Will, it tends to be that lateral violence within often the neurodivergent community of other autistic people who, either don't think that she's autistic enough, or she's too autistic, or she's lying, or she's not representing them, or she's too successful, and that's not fair because they're not successful. And, there's a million and one reasons why these people and it's like, it boggles my mind. At the heart of it is such a gentle, kind-hearted soul who's also autistic and has a lot of struggles herself, and doing the best that she can to live her life and spread kindness and authenticity, and yet she's that's the bit that I struggle with. Like, yes, she understands that she might have 20 teenage girls who are following her around the shopping centre and taking photos, and that comes with the territory, and that's never malicious. It can be a lot, but it's never nasty. But it's the nasty comments and the just the stuff that you read, and you just think, why would you say that to somebody? Like, I think social media just never fails to amaze me of how nasty people can be.
And like the thing is, from what I've picked up with Chloe, she just seems like a very lovely, down to earth person. Why would you be giving a person like that death threat? Like, that just blows my mind.
It really is horrendous. Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't realize that. I would have thought, some comments, but death threats, like that's just crazy. But no, but thank you so much for sharing that. It is interesting to look into that sort of life and all of those types of things. But maybe moving on from that, parenting can be unpredictable at the best of times. And I think you've shared a few things. I bet you didn't think your daughter would ever become famous, right? Well, maybe
not to the level that she's at now. Absolutely. I mean, it's something that you can't even begin to imagine.
But and I think this fits in well with what
it's certainly been a wild ride and a journey.
Yeah, totally. So how do you navigate those? So how do you navigate? And sorry for everyone, there is a bit of a delay. We are having a few internet issues and all of that. But how do you navigate those moments when being ADHD or another neurodivergent trait show up in daily family life and stuff like that?
Oh, dear. I think one of the most difficult parts about being a parent these days, and any other parent who's listening will no doubt agree with me. In the olden days, like when my eldest kid, so Chloe's 28 and my youngest has just turned 13. So I've got 5 kids with quite a big age gap. And, back in the old days when my eldest kids were little, all the school forms were like a piece of paper that came home. Mum, can you sign this and send it back? And you'd staple it in their diary and go back. Now everything is on, like they've got all these different portals and links and emails and stuff. And my brain just does not, like, if I've got to follow instructions or go to an email and then it's like, click on this link and then you've got to do this and then you've got to do that. And then I miss all of that. So and my kids are super busy. My youngest daughter plays like football and netball and, she's always got a lot of stuff on, and a lot of it's kind of really important, like state, kind of representative team sports, and there's always stuff going on. And absolutely, I miss, like, I just have no idea what's going on. There's all these different WhatsApp groups and there's so many different things to do. And I really struggle with all of that. And it's so wonderful because my youngest child, who's just turned 13, is just the most capable, intelligent, altogether young person who I think could just run like the whole family. And so she'll actually say to me, Mum, we've got this thing that we've got to fill out. Do you want me to do it for you? Because I know your brain doesn't work that well. And she'll get on and just do it all in a couple of minutes and it's done. And so, she's got all my logins and passwords and credit card details. If something needs to be paid, she'll get on and, and so I've just been really honest. Like, they know that I can do, there's a lot of stuff I can do amazingly well. Like, I throw the best parties you've ever seen. I give the best presents you've ever seen. My kids will never go without when it comes to any of that stuff. I'm the fun mum, I'm the over-the-top mum. They call me Kris Jenner, the Kardashians' mum, because I go over the top with everything. But give me a form or anything that I've got to fill out, or those permission slips for school, I will forget the whole lot of them. And it's not because I don't care. It's just that that is how my brain works. And so, the school was sending me a couple of emails a day for 2 of my kids for permission slips. And I actually contacted them and said, can you forward them to my husband's email? Because he's really good he's on email all day, every day for work. And if he sees one of them comes in from school needing a permission, because I was sick of getting phone calls from the school going, your kid's got an excursion today, you haven't signed the form, they can't go unless you sign it. And I'm like, I don't know where the form is, how do I do that? So it's being honest. And I think by being honest and sort of showing our flaws or our deficits or the areas that we're not as, adept at other things to our kids, it's allowing them to be the same. I say to them, mum's brain has constantly got 50 tabs going and there's music playing in the background and I miss this stuff. But, if I can outsource it, I absolutely will. If I can pay someone to do something, I absolutely will. If I can get my kids to do their forms and send back their permission slips and forge my signature, well, go for it.
Why not? Yeah, I hear you on getting other people, especially in business myself, like one of the hardest things I've had to deal with is having to, because I'm broke I'm trying to build a business. I can't afford to pay people things, all of that. So sometimes I am really working to my weaknesses a lot of the time, which is incredibly difficult. But to tell you what, Sarah, I reckon it'd be awesome to go to one of your parties one day.
I do throw a good party, Will.
Nice.
Everyone knows where the party house.
The party house, eh? Nice. I'll rain check that one, eh? I'll rain check that, eh? No problem at all.
Absolutely.
Now, moving on from that, how has being neurodivergent shaped the way you connect with your kids and understand their needs? And you did touch base on that a little bit just there.
Yeah. I think for me, I speak a lot about the importance of connection over correction and understanding, behavior is often about safety and their needs and needing to be seen and understood. Trying to, again, like I said before, sort of thinking back to when, I was a child or a teenager and those feelings of being misunderstood or not listened to or not heard. I try to pause, before overreacting. I remember many, many years ago, before we knew that Chloe was autistic, she had the most epic, what we thought at the time was a tantrum. It was a meltdown that had lasted for hours and it was exhausting. I didn't know what to do. I was doing all the wrong things. It had lasted for a long time. And like many parents at the end of it, I was so frustrated and exhausted and probably angry and flustered and, all of the things. And, I said to Chloe, I can still remember, I just looked at her and I said, God, Chloe, that was terrible. I'm so exhausted. That was awful. And she just looked at me and she was probably, 9 or 10 at the time. And I can still remember she just stopped and she looked at me and she goes, you think that was really hard for you? She said, how do you think that was for me? And it wasn't until not long after when she was diagnosed autistic and I started to kind of understand more about how her brain works and what an actual meltdown was as opposed to just a naughty kid or a tantrum and kind of reflecting on, how tough the world can be for us and our kids. And that, often it's just your nervous system saying, I'm done, I'm tapping out, so that kid that's having an epic, what people think tantrum in the middle of Kmart, it's not because they're not getting the gift that they're asking their mum for. It's because the overhead lights and the buzzing of the, the store and the sensory overload has just sent them to, to total and utter meltdown, which I can understand. I'll be in a shopping center and go, right, I've got to get out of here. I'm done. And, so trying to sort of have that understanding of what is this behavior showing me? What is this behavior telling me? and doing that for myself as well. Why am I feeling like this? What's going on for me to make me feel like this or react like this? What's going on for my kid? And I think, for parents of all kids, if we can sort of try and pause and have a think about what's really going on, because it's often not what we initially or somebody else initially thinks. And, just trying to have that connection before correction to try and just sort of get on their level to try and work out what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What can I do?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I have the same thing about shops as well, by the way. So I hear you on that. I just cannot go to a shop when it is crazy busy. I have to go like when I know there's hard. I don't know about you, but I get annoyed just in the car park when people like, I can't find a park and things like that, if that makes sense. But
I'll just go home if I can't get a park. The online shopping is the best invention ever. I do not go into the shops. I do click and collect for the supermarket. I do all my online shopping. Like for me, I look at people who go and hang out at the shopping mall all day on a Saturday, and I'm like, what is wrong with you to want to actually do that? Like, why?
Yeah, totally. But I will say one thing, right? Like the only time I will go to the shops is to go and touch clothes, because I want to find out what the feeling of the clothes are like
the fabric
before I actually buy them. Then I might jump online and see if I can get it cheaper somewhere else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'll often stick to the brands. Like I know there's certain brands that I like, or I'm always scrolling down to the fabric to see, is it a natural fabric or a synthetic one, and only buy shops that I can send stuff back to, because I know that if I get it out and I'm like, nope, don't like that because I don't like the feel of it, I'll send it back.
Yes, most definitely hear you on that. Out of curiosity, just on the same sort of topic here, I find that I do a lot of public speaking, all of that type of thing, and I get so many parents coming in, because I do a lot of stuff like what we're actually working towards at Neurodiversity Academy is helping people identify what happens after they've finished high school and that with their careers. Where should they go and study? What could their career look like in that? And you know what? It was really interesting. And, I'll just go and do talks about what your career could look like. But how many parents started coming up to me going, man, we are so worried about what my son or daughter's future is going to look like. And it had never I had lived that, but I had never lived it from a parent. Like, I'm not a parent myself, but how much parents are really worried, or probably staying up late at night thinking about what their kid's career is going to look like.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that goes back to what I said, Will, the importance for everyone, not just neurodivergent people, but, everybody should be identifying, everyone has things that they're good at. Everyone has strengths. Everyone has things that they love doing. Like if we can push everybody into, what it is that they love doing, or, what brings them joy, whatever that is, then our kids are much more likely to end up in a career that they love, and, that it's going to be mentally healthy for them as well as satisfying. And, it doesn't have to fit in the box of whatever you think that, your kids should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what, right? Like one thing that I picked up was that when I was in school, it was very much, and this was like, I finished in 2000, but like, it was sort of like, oh, if you don't get good marks, you'll never get a good job. You'll never be able to get into university, all of that. Right. So for me, failing school. Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's like, that's not the case. We should not be telling kids at such a young age that, hey, if you don't do well, you'll never be able to do this. You'll never be able to that. We should be saying, hey, look, if there's look, I can see that you're struggling with this. Maybe we should look at this here, because this is where you really excel at. Like I said to you earlier, right? People would say I was like the cool, popular kid. well, maybe that was good because I was really good at networking and building relationships, which are very good career types of things, right? So why aren't schools looking at those types of things? And, I had a parent speak to me the other day, and I think sometimes, not all schools, but some schools just don't understand these things about, neurodivergent kids and their futures and all of that. Because I had this woman come up to me and she's like, yeah, look, my son, he will never get a proper job. He'll probably be lucky to get a job packing boxes and things like that. And nothing against people who pack boxes or anything like that, right? But what I'm getting at is that the next thing she said to me was, yeah, but he is brilliant at debating. He's the captain of the debating team. I'm like, he's the captain of the debating team.
He's a lawyer in the making.
Totally right. Right. Like, this is the thing. It's like, why aren't you looking at that and going, oh my God, he is brilliant at this. Let's look at these jobs type of thing.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. Like, it's thinking, pardon the pun, after you just said about the boxes, but thinking outside the box. It's like, what are these kids brilliant at, that might be really poor at social interaction or whatever it is, but this, like, they've got a brilliant mind in research, or they're, totally obsessed with the weather. Like, I had a young family working with me a while ago, and they came to me really concerned because they had a little girl who was, autistic and ADHD and dyslexic, and since a very young age, her hyperfixation was like clouds and weather. And like, this kid knew everything. I mean, she wasn't even 10. And, they were like, oh, we really want to work on social skills to like stop her talking about this and hyperfixating on it because all the other kids think she's weird. And, and I'm like, no, absolutely. Like, then like, we're not going to get her anymore. And I'm like, no, go and buy her every book and encyclopedia and let her watch the shows. And this kid is going to be like the top meteorologist in Australia, and, like, feed into this, like, take her to the museums on the weekend where they're learning about it. And they started doing that, and suddenly their kid was so much happier. And I'm like, why would you try and, it's not a negative or unhealthy, absolutely some kids might have a negative or unhealthy hyperfixation or something that's not necessarily something you want to encourage. But this kid was like, her brain was just like, even the whole time she was talking to me, she was pointing in the sky and going, that's a cumulus cloud, this cloud, this is it, like all these things I've never heard of. And her parents were kind of rolling their eyes like, oh, sorry, like, this is a bit. And I'm like, no, this is so cool. Like, how did this kid get, like, this kid just had a brain that was predisposed to do this. And if we can capture whatever that is that our kids are, they're loving and like hyperfixated on, it's the next generation of geniuses. As I said earlier, like, the top scientists and surgeons and stuff, they have to be neurodivergent because the amount of energy and study and hyperfixation they have to give to those things to become the absolute top of their field. Like, a neurotypical person couldn't do that.
Yeah. No, you're dead right. You're dead right. I'm a big fan of, say, Formula One, right? And like, I'd swear, and I know some people actually in Formula One who are neurodivergent and all of that type of thing. And I'm like, you would have, because like, it's really based on aerodynamics and thinking outside the box. And it's like, that's a perfect breeding ground for people 100%. Like us. But you know what as well?
Yeah, definitely.
And do you know what else I was thinking as well? Like, we see all of these big entrepreneurs now, right? It seems like, they've got to be neurodivergent, because the way to be, I think, like, to be like a successful entrepreneur, you can't live by like, in this box. You've got to be so out there, and it's the perfect breeding ground for us.
Yeah. 100%.
But look, I think, we do have some other questions, but look, I think we've gotten through a fair bit there today. So I'm thinking we might wind it up. But look, I might just go into one quick one. Finally, what message would you share with other neurodivergent parents who might be struggling or feeling like they're not doing enough?
The first thing I say is, you are doing enough. you are the expert on yourself and your child. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to advocate for your child. You know yourself and your child better than any expert or therapist, or, you're not failing. You're parenting on hard mode. When you're parenting with a brain that's got 50 tabs open and, Spotify playing in the background with the little twirly, computer internet thing going nonstop, it's hard, and you're allowed to do things differently. And your kids don't need a perfect parent. They need a real, authentic parent, one that shows up, one who apologizes, one who laughs, one who loves too hard, one who forgets to sign the forms and then says, I'm sorry. Like, your kids are never going to remember that, they turned up to school in the wrong uniform, or, you forgot to send them with the gold coin donation or whatever it is. They're going to remember, the mum who cheered them on and who encouraged them to do the things that they love doing and could see what lit them up and identified that, that sparkly part of their brain that made them happy. And, that's what's important. And, that's what we need to be focusing on for ourselves and for our kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Look, Sarah, thank you so much for being on today. Now, if people want to connect with yourself and all the amazing work, you've got a book as well. Did you want to plug that maybe? Where can people connect with you?
I do. I have got it right here. Here's one I prepared earlier. So this is my book, Parenting Different. My socials are Mama Sladen. No doubt you'll probably share them, Will, but that was a name given to me by some of Chloe's fans a few years ago, and it stuck with it. So I've still got that. That's my Instagram, is Mama Sladen. And I've got a website, which is just sarahhayden.com.au. So obviously my name, but you'll probably be able to share them. I would love to hear from people. Feel free to reach out. I do a lot of work in this space myself, either one-to-one counselling and support and therapy, but I also do a lot of training and conferences and keynote speaking and things too. So this is the area of passion, to keep spreading the word about our awesome neurodivergent people, colleagues, kids, partners, everything. So thank you.
No problem at all. But I dare say I will probably run into you somewhere along the windy road somewhere, and maybe I can join you on one of those parties you throw. What do you reckon?
Absolutely. Sounds like a plan, Will.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And look, for all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media pages. My name's Will Wheeler, and this is Neurodivergent Mates. Till next time.